Hello there, and welcome to episode 6 of Mateo's Home Kitchen. And we're actually in my kitchen. Finally, it's been a while since I've actually done an episode in my actual kitchen. Today, we will be cooking stuffing alla Siciliana, which is something that my grandmother's mother used to make. And my mom and dad and I decided, hey, we should try this tonight for dinner. So that's what we're doing. You can see my dad gathering our ingredients over there. And so I will now go ahead and list what my dad is gathering for us to begin. Now, in addition to the stuffing alla Siciliana, we'll also be preparing an agrodolce sauce and like a veal spiadini, which is basically a crust. All right, so without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so there is actually one thing I do need to say before we actually begin. We had to make a few modifications to the recipe to make this work for the purposes of my family dinner. For example, normally with this recipe, you would be using pine nuts, raisins, and white wine. However, we are omitting the pine nuts because my mother straight up cannot eat pine nuts. She's allergic to nuts. We're taking the raisins out because for some reason, my mom and dad have an objection to raisins. And we're not working with the wine either because me cooking with wine in a YouTube video is probably not legal and it will not bode well for my viewership to see an underage person cooking with wine. So, no, we're not using the wine. Other modifications that had to be made include omitting the parsley simply because we just forgot to buy it. Chicken broth was replaced with vegetable broth because, again, we didn't have chicken broth in the house. And finally, we're replacing Romano cheese with Manchego cheese because my mom's lactose intolerant and can't eat the Romano cheese. So we're using Manchego. You would normally use Romano or, hell, even Parmesan cheese for this recipe, but we're using Manchego. All right, so now we can begin. So what we're going to do first is mix the butter and flour. This is in making the sauce. So we want 2 tablespoons of butter for the sauce. So we're going to go ahead and put this into a nice little bowl. And this is flour, 2 tablespoons worth of flour, and that's also gonna go inside the bowl. And we have to mix these until they combine. All right, so what we're going to do now is pour out the vinegar and put that into this pot that we have over here. Open the vinegar. So that is 1 cup of vinegar. And into the pot she goes. Next up is the garlic. In here there are 4 cloves worth of garlic out of the 10 cloves that we need for the entire recipe. So that's going in there. Next up for the agrodolce sauce is the sugar. We need 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm just gonna go ahead and measure that out for you guys so you can see about how much sugar we need. Actually, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. Let's try this. 1, 2. That is 2 tablespoons of sugar. And now we get the rosemary. And for the rosemary, we need 1 tablespoon's worth of rosemary. Let me just open this real quick. Okay, I did not prepare very well for this. Yeah, you can tell I was not originally planning on filming my making this, but here we are. And we want 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary. And there goes the rosemary. So what we're going to do now that we've added all of these things into the pot is we are going to... Oh yeah, I forgot our stove is a tricky trickster and doesn't like to work very well. So what we're going to do to get the stove to work properly is use the lighter. And put it on medium-high heat, and we're going to allow this to come to a boil. Now I put the lid over it to ensure that the heat actually stays trapped and to allow it to boil faster. So that is everything in the pot, and we're gonna come back once it's boiled. All right, so the vinegar is now boiling, and we have to stir this for a good amount of time. So what you're gonna do once it is boiling is you are going to stir it until it has reduced by 2/3. This should take 3 to 5 minutes. All right, so this has reduced quite nicely in 3 minutes of stirring. So what we're now going to do is measure out, oh my God, is measure up 2.5 cups of vegetable broth. So there's 2 cups of vegetable broth, and that goes in there. And other than that, we need an additional 1/2 cup of vegetable broth, which so happens to finish out the box we have here. And we're going to add that. So once all the chicken broth is in, we're going to go ahead and bring the heat up to high and recover it, because we are going to do a common cooking thing called BTB-RTS, which stands for bring to boil, reduce to simmer. So once it's boiling, we're going to reduce it to a simmer, and we're going to let it simmer for 20 minutes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to strain the sauce after it has simmered for 20 minutes. Because we don't want any of that chunky stuff in there. So go ahead and take this out, and it reveals that as our agrodolce sauce. But it's not finished yet. We have to actually put it back in there, back into the saucepan it goes, and back to the stove it goes. What we do with this is, oh, Dad, turn the heat off. Let's get the lighter again. Okay, my mother is having like strife with the lighter to be very amusing. If I was allowed to do outtakes, then this would be going on the outtake roll. But anyway, what we have to do now is bring this to a simmer and simmer it for a further 10 minutes. So it's been simmering for a good 10 minutes now. Now is when we add the butter flour mixture I prepared earlier. This is supposed to thicken the sauce. So we're gonna go ahead and stir it like this until it thickens, which might take a little while. Oh my god, it's all lumpy and gross. I probably should have melted the butter first. Yeah, just a tip, you guys should probably melt the butter before you put it in the flour because I forgot to do that. My sauce looks a little lumpy, but I'm sorting that out right now by extra stirring. So yeah, this is what the sauce looks like. It's normally going to be a lot less lumpy than this because you should melt the butter a little bit first before you actually put it in the flour, which I neglected to do. So I'm going to stir this until I sort all the lumps out, and then I will. So the nice thing about the stuffing is that we don't really have to do much beforehand after so you see our ingredients here, and we can get straight to it. In a saute pan, this pan right here, we're going to go ahead and put the remaining 6 cloves of the 10 cloves of garlic that we need. We are going to go ahead and put in the onion as well. And with that onion, I believe that is 1 onion because that is 1 cup chopped. And then finally, we are going to go ahead and put in the olive oil, for which we are going to use 5 of the 6 tablespoons that we need of the olive oil. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now. 1. Oh, okay, oops. 2. 3. 4. 5. That is 5 tablespoons of olive oil. And the last thing we're going to go ahead and add is the red pepper flakes. So what we're going to do with all that I just added is we're going to, and of course the stove, as per usual, is not working. So we're going to grab the lighter. Let's hope it's not as difficult to light the stove this time. Okay, not quite there. Alright, I think we got it now. So what we want to do with that is we're going to go ahead and cook this in the saute pan on a medium-low heat for 4 to 5 minutes, stirring it the whole way. 4 or 5 minutes. What you are now going to do is add in our singular bay leaf, the parsley, pine nuts, and raisins, if you were using them, and the basil. And we're going to go ahead and cook that for 3 more minutes, and we're still stirring the whole way, so you still have to keep stirring this very well. Cut. Fully integrated with the rest of the food. So we're going to go ahead and increase the heat to high heat. And you may or may not need to wait for it to sizzle. As you can see here, we don't need to wait for anything to sizzle. So what we're going to do now is we're going to measure out 3/4 of a cup of lemon juice, which we're substituting for white wine, and we're going to go ahead and pour it in there. So So we have one.
Okay, it's over. Another interception. Built one.
Oh my god. 2. Three quarters of a cup of lemon juice. After this, we do need to stir it a little more after this. So we're going to stir this for 3 to 5 minutes once you have added the lemon juice or white wine or whatever aromatic you're using. After we have finished with that, we can turn off the heat and actually go ahead and add it into this bowl right here. This bowl has been washed and used it to strain the agrodolce sauce. And once we have all that, we're gonna go in and add in everything else, starting with the grated cheese, salt, pepper, breadcrumbs, and finally, the egg. Thank you. And now we're gonna go
I
ahead.
would get that.
The what?
That's not a good thing to mix.
The whisk.
I'll get a fork.
So we're gonna go ahead and mix this with a fork because we're using an egg, so we need to like beat it up until it is moist. So we are mixing everything for the stuffing together until it is all nice and so what we're gonna do now is preheat the oven to 400 degrees in preparation to make the actual crust, which is the veal. So we start by preheating the oven to 400 degrees. Go. All right, so what we're doing here is we are spraying the baking dish with Pam olive oil spray to resemble actual olive oil. Now, whether or not you're a fan of Pam, always spray your pan with something because it will help it not stick. All right, so it turns out we actually needed the breadcrumbs again. We need 2 or 3 tablespoons of the breadcrumbs to actually go on the baking dish. Yeah, I've never heard of that being done before.
Why do you think they do that?
I actually have no idea, but I think it's something to do with coating the actual veal in the bread.
It does, and so it makes it crispy. And here's a little brush you might want to use to even it out, just lightly.
All right.
Hey,
Lightly.
Mateo,
Mom, I got this.
and both of you are filming this, so this is all cut, ready to go.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Father. Now, this is veal. Thin slices of veal that are here, and that's what the stuffing's going in. So what we're going to do is we are going to put a little bit of stuffing inside each piece of veal, like so. So we have the stuffing inside of the actual pieces of veal, and what we're gonna do is we're going to roll it like a... So stuffing's in the veal. Veal's in the stuffing, I mean. And what you're gonna do is roll it. Oh my god, this took like 4 or 5 takes to get right. Like, I'm really bad at like rolling, apparently. So you roll this as if it were a burrito, and you don't want it coming apart while it's in the oven, so you have to get a toothpick through the seam side. You only want to get it a little bit through the seam side so it can actually rest on the bottom, and you put it on the pan, seam side down. Cut. I actually put it in the oven. I'm going to correct a mistake I made earlier. It turns out we were actually supposed to reheat it to 350 and not 400. 350, not 400. Before I put this in the oven, I'm going to cover why we put bay leaves and onions on the tray. The bay leaves are there for, and also the onions are there for aromatic purposes. So now we put these in the oven at 350, not 400. And we put these on for 15 minutes, and now we wait. Okay, 15 minutes, it's ready. Veal rolls, stuffing alla Siciliana. And here it is, our final product. Doesn't it look beautiful? Action. All right, so we're at the dinner table, and this is the finished product. It looks so good. So we're gonna put it on our plate. Yes, we use plates for civilized people in this family. And we're gonna put some sauce on top of it. Oh, that looks so delicious. And now, I'm gonna pop it in my mouth. This is absolutely delectable. I am now of the opinion that everyone should try this. And I'm extra proud that I got to cook this today because I got to bring back a recipe that has been dormant in my family for 2 entire generations. It has been such an honor to help this come true. So, thank you to everyone who has helped me make this lovely stuffing alla Siciliana and veal rolls.